The grand hall of the Zephyrian royal palace stretched for what seemed like miles, its crystalline walls catching and fracturing the light from 3 suns into dancing rainbows. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the entrance, her diplomatic uniform feeling suddenly inadequate among the flowing robes and shimmering garments of the alien nobility. She had been briefed extensively about Zephyrian culture, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of their ethereal beauty. The Zephyrians moved with fluid grace, their tall, slender forms seeming to float rather than walk. Their skin had an opalescent quality that shifted between pale blues and silvers, and their large, luminous eyes dominated faces that were both alien and hauntingly beautiful. What struck Sarah most was how they communicated, through a complex system of light patterns that emanated from bioluminescent patches along their temples and throats. The linking ceremony will begin shortly, announced High Chancellor Vextar, his voice carrying the musical quality common to his species. Each suitor will attempt to establish a neural link with Princess Lyrelay. Success would mean marriage and a place in the royal line of succession. Sarah watched as the ceremony began. One by one, young Zephyrian nobles approached a figure seated on a throne at the far end of the hall. Even from this distance, Sarah could see that Princess Lyrelay was different from the others. Where they glowed with soft bioluminescence, she remained dim. Where they held their heads high with confidence, she sat perfectly still, almost statue-like. The first suitor, a tall male with particularly bright temple lights, approached the throne. He knelt and extended his hand toward the princess. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the air around them shimmered with failed neural energy, and the young noble stumbled backward as if struck. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The second attempt yielded the same result, as did the third, fourth, and fifth. With each failure, the whispers grew louder. Sarah caught fragments of conversation from nearby courtiers. "She's been like this since the accident," one said, their lights flickering in patterns Sarah's translator couldn't fully decode. "Neural damage," another whispered. "The blindness was just the beginning. Her linking ability is completely severed. The royal line will end with her," a third voice added sadly. As more suitors failed, Sarah found herself studying the princess more closely. Lyrelay sat with perfect posture despite her obvious isolation. Her face, while bearing the same ethereal beauty as her people, was marked by fine scars that traced from her temples down to her cheekbones. Her eyes, instead of the luminous quality of other Zephyrians, appeared clouded, almost white. The ceremony continued for hours. Noble after noble approached, and each was repelled by the same invisible force. Sarah noticed how the princess's composure never wavered, even as the rejections mounted. There was a dignity in her stillness that spoke of great inner strength. "Perhaps we should conclude the ceremony," Chancellor Vexitar suggested after the 30th failure. "It appears that today, like so many others, will not yield a successful linking." The princess spoke for the first time, her voice carrying a melodic quality that made the universal translator struggle to convey its full beauty. "I understand," she said simply. "Thank you all for your attempts." As the crowd began to disperse, Sarah found herself walking closer to the throne area. She had come to Zephyros Prime as part of humanity's first diplomatic mission to this sector. But something about the princess's situation called to her professional instincts. As a xenopsychologist, she had studied interspecies communication her entire career. "Your Highness," Sarah said, approaching the throne area as the last of the nobles departed. Princess Lyrelay turned toward the sound of her voice, her clouded eyes somehow finding Sarah's location with surprising accuracy. "You are the human ambassador," she said. "It wasn't a question." "Sarah Chen," she introduced herself, offering a slight bow. "I couldn't help but observe the ceremony. I hope you don't mind me asking, but what exactly is neural linking among your people?" The princess considered the question for a moment. "It's how we truly communicate," she explained. "Beyond words, beyond light patterns. When two Zephyrians link, they share thoughts, emotions, memories. It's the foundation of all our relationships, especially marriage. Without the ability to link, I am..." She paused. "Incomplete." Sarah felt a surge of empathy. "May I ask what happened to you?" "A transport accident 3 years ago," Lyrelay said. "I was visiting the outer colonies when our ship hit an electromagnetic storm. Most of the passengers were killed instantly. I survived, but the neural feedback damaged my linking ability and took my sight. The healers say the pathways are severed beyond repair. And without linking ability, you cannot marry." "More than that," the princess said with a sad smile. "I cannot truly connect with anyone." Among my people, surface communication is considered shallow, incomplete. To be unable to link is to be forever alone, even in a crowd. Sarah studied the princess's face, noting the intelligence that shone despite her physical limitations. Have your healers tried alternative methods of communication? Different approaches to neural pathway restoration? They've tried everything our science offers, Lyra Lee replied. But perhaps our science isn't the only science in the galaxy. There was something in the way she said it that made Sarah curious. What do you mean? I've heard stories about humans, the princess said, turning more fully toward Sarah. That your species has a different kind of neural architecture, that you communicate in ways we don't fully understand. Some say humans have formed bonds with species that our people couldn't link with. Sarah nodded slowly. It was true that humans had shown an unusual ability to form connections across species barriers, often through methods that other races considered primitive or impossible. Empathy, touch, shared experience, and things that didn't require advanced neural linking abilities. Would you? The princess began, then stopped herself. No, it's foolish to hope. Please, Sarah encouraged. What were you going to ask? Would you consider attempting a linking with me? I know it sounds impossible. Your species doesn't have our neural architecture. But I've been alone for 3 years, truly alone in a way my people rarely experience. If there's even the smallest chance... Sarah looked at the princess, really looked at her. She saw not the failed links or the political complications, but a person who had been isolated by circumstances beyond her control. As a xenopsychologist, she understood that communication took many forms. As a human, she understood that sometimes the most meaningful connections happened in the spaces between what was expected and what was possible. I'd be honored to try, Sarah said. Extending her hand toward the throne, the princess hesitated. You should know that every failed attempt causes pain. I wouldn't want to subject you to that. I appreciate the warning, Sarah said, keeping her hand extended. But I think humans might experience this differently than Zephyrians do. Slowly, Princess Lyrelei reached out and took Sarah's offered hand. The moment their hands touched, Sarah felt a jolt that was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It wasn't painful, as the princess had warned, but it was overwhelming in its intensity. For a split second, she thought she could hear colors and see music, as if her senses had been completely rewired. The princess gasped and pulled her hand back, her clouded eyes wide with shock. What was that? She whispered. Sarah flexed her fingers, still feeling a tingling sensation where they had made contact. I'm not sure, she admitted, but it felt different from what I expected. Not unpleasant, just intense. Chancellor Vextar, who had been preparing to leave, hurried back toward them. His bioluminescent patches were flickering rapidly in patterns that Sarah's translator indicated meant extreme surprise. Princess, what happened? We detected a massive neural surge. I felt something, Lirelei said, her voice filled with wonder. Not a traditional link, but connection. For just a moment, I wasn't alone. The Chancellor's expression shifted from surprise to concern. Your Highness, this could be dangerous. Human neural patterns are completely unknown to us. We have no idea what kind of damage might result from sustained contact. Sarah stepped forward. With respect, Chancellor, humans have successfully interfaced with dozens of species across the galaxy. We might not have your advanced neural linking abilities, but we have our own ways of connecting. Perhaps that's exactly what's needed here. This is highly irregular, Vextar protested. The princess is the last of the royal line. We cannot risk her well-being on an untested procedure with an alien species. I'm willing to take the risk, Princess Lyrelei said firmly. I've spent 3 years in isolation. If there's a chance, however small, that I might be able to connect with someone again, I want to try. The Chancellor looked between them, his lights flickering in what Sarah interpreted as agitation. At the very least, this should be done under medical supervision. If you're determined to proceed, we should involve our healers. Agreed, Sarah said. But I'd also like to contact my ship's medical officer. Dr. Martinez has extensive experience with interspecies neural compatibility. Within an hour, they had assembled in the palace's medical wing. The room was a fascinating blend of Zephyrian crystal technology and adaptive human equipment that had been beamed down from Sarah's ship. Dr. Elena Martinez, a compact woman with graying hair and sharp eyes, was running scans with both human and Zephyrian instruments. This is fascinating. Dr. Martinez murmured, studying the readouts. Princess, your neural pathways show extensive damage in the traditional linking areas, but there are compensatory networks that have developed. It's as if your brain has been trying to rebuild the connections through alternative routes. The Zephyrian healer, master physician Kethron, examined his own instruments with obvious confusion. These secondary pathways don't align with any known neural architecture. They appear almost random. Not random, Dr. Martinez corrected. Different. Sarah, when you made contact, you triggered activity in neural regions that we typically associate with human empathy and emotional processing. It's possible that your species' communication methods are accessing these alternative pathways. Sarah looked at the princess, who was lying on the medical table with monitoring devices attached to her temple region. How do you feel about trying again, with medical supervision this time? I want to try, Lyrelai said without hesitation. But I want to understand what you're doing differently. How do humans connect without neural linking? Sarah considered the question. We use what we call emotional intelligence. We read body language, voice tones, facial expressions. We share experiences and build trust over time. Sometimes we connect through touch, but not in the way your people do. For us, touch can convey comfort, support, understanding. But how can you truly know another person without sharing their thoughts directly? The princess asked. We learn to listen, Sarah said simply, not just to words but to everything else. The way someone breathes when they're nervous, how their voice changes when they're sad, the small gestures they make when they're thinking. We build understanding piece by piece. Dr. Martinez nodded approvingly. Human connection is cumulative. It grows stronger through repeated interactions and shared experiences. Perhaps that's what the princess's brain is trying to do. Create a gradual building connection rather than the instantaneous link that Zephyrians normally experience. Are you ready to try again? Sarah asked, extending her hand toward the princess. Lyrelai reached out slowly, her hand trembling slightly. I've never tried to connect gradually before. How do I do it? Don't try to link, Sarah advised. Just focus on the physical sensation of touch. Feel the warmth, the texture. Let yourself be present in the moment. Their hands met again, and this time the sensation was gentler. Sarah felt the same unusual crossing of senses, but it was manageable. She could sense something, not thoughts exactly, but emotions. A deep well of loneliness, yes, but also strength, curiosity, and hope. The medical instruments began registering activity. Remarkable, breathed Dr. Martinez. Both of your brains are showing increased activity in regions associated with emotional processing and social bonding. I can feel, the princess started, then stopped. It's not like linking. I can't hear your thoughts, but I can sense your presence. You're caring. It's real. Sarah squeezed the princess's hand gently. That's how human connection begins. With presence, with caring. The understanding comes later, through time and shared experience. Master physician Kethran looked at his instruments with amazement. The princess's alternative neural pathways are activating. They're creating new connections. This could change everything. How long can you maintain contact? Dr. Martinez asked. Sarah looked at the princess. How does it feel? Are you in any pain? No pain, Lirali said, wonder in her voice. Just warmth. Connection. I haven't felt anything like this since before the accident. They maintained the hand contact for nearly an hour, with the medical team monitoring every neural fluctuation. During that time, Sarah found herself becoming more attuned to the princess's emotional state. She could sense when Lyrelai felt frustrated at not being able to communicate more directly, and she could feel the princess's growing amazement at the reality of connection. This is working, Dr. Martinez announced. Both of your neural patterns are stabilizing around this new form of contact. Princess, your brain is actually rebuilding pathways, just not in the traditional Zephyrian manner. When they finally broke contact, both women were exhausted but exhilarated. The princess sat up on the medical table, her clouded eyes somehow seeming brighter. When can we try again? She asked. Chancellor Vextar, who had been observing the entire process, stepped forward. His bioluminescent patches were flickering in patterns that indicated deep thought. Your Highness, this is unprecedented. We need to consider the implications carefully. What implications? Sarah asked. The Chancellor looked uncomfortable. If the princess can indeed form a connection with a human, It raises questions about succession, about royal obligations, about the future of our people's understanding of communication itself. Princess Lyrelai straightened her shoulders. Then perhaps it's time our people learned something new about connection, she said firmly. I've spent 3 years believing I was broken, incomplete. Today I discovered that I'm not broken. I just needed someone who spoke a different language of the heart. Sarah felt a surge of admiration for the princess's courage. Would you like to continue working on this connection? It won't be like traditional Zephyrian linking, but it could be something meaningful in its own way. Yes, Lyrelai said without hesitation. I want to learn this human way of connecting. I want to understand what it means to build a relationship piece by piece. As they left the medical wing that day, Sarah realized that she had stumbled into something far more complex than a diplomatic mission. She had found someone who challenged everything she thought she knew about communication, connection, and the bridges that could be built between entirely different ways of being. Over the following weeks, Sarah found herself spending more and more time at the palace. What had begun as a diplomatic curiosity had evolved into something she couldn't quite define. The princess had insisted on daily sessions to practice their unique form of communication, and Sarah had agreed, telling herself it was for the advancement of interspecies understanding. The truth was more complicated than that. Tell me about Earth, Princess Lyrelai requested during one of their afternoon sessions. They were sitting in the palace gardens, a crystalline maze of towering structures that sang softly in the wind. Sarah had learned to describe things visually for the princess, who seemed to hunger for details about the world beyond her own experience. Earth is different from here, Sarah said, taking the princess's hand as had become their custom. The moment of connection had grown easier over time, less jarring and more natural. Where your world is all crystalline light, Earth is soft. We have things called trees, living towers that grow from the ground covered in green leaves that change colors with the seasons. Through their contact, Sarah could feel the princess's fascination. The emotional connection allowed them to share not just words but the feelings behind them. When Sarah described the ocean, Lyrelai could sense her awe. When she talked about mountains, the princess felt her sense of adventure. I wish I could see your world through your eyes, Lyrelai said wistfully. In a way you can, Sarah replied. That's what this connection we've built allows us to do. You're experiencing my memories and emotions about Earth. It's different from seeing, but it's real. Dr. Martinez and Master Physician Catherine had been documenting their sessions, amazed at the continued development of neural pathways in the princess's brain. The alternative networks were not only stabilizing but growing stronger. The princess is developing what we might call human-style emotional intelligence, Dr. Martinez explained to Chancellor Vextar during one of their joint briefings. She's learning to read nonverbal cues, to process emotional information in ways that her species typically doesn't need to develop. And Ambassador Chen? The Chancellor asked, is developing sensitivity to Zephyrian emotional frequencies, Master Physician Kethran added. Her neural patterns show adaptation that we've never seen in a human before. She's becoming more attuned to our species' emotional wavelengths. The Chancellor's bioluminescent patches flickered, in what Sarah had learned indicated concern. The political implications of this development are significant, he said. The princess is of marriageable age and the last of the royal line. If she cannot link with a Zephyrian noble, what does that mean for the succession? Sarah felt uncomfortable discussing the princess's future as if she weren't in the room, but she understood the Chancellor's concerns. Zephyrian society was built around the concept of neural linking, and their royal succession had specific requirements that had never been tested by a situation like this. Perhaps, Dr. Martinez suggested carefully, the question isn't whether the princess can link in the traditional way, but whether she can form meaningful connections that serve the same purpose. The same purpose? The Chancellor questioned. Communication, understanding, partnership, Dr. Martinez explained. From what I've observed, the connection between Princess Lyrelai and Ambassador Chen fulfills many of the same functions as traditional linking, just through different mechanisms. That evening, Sarah found herself alone with the princess in the royal library, a vast space filled with crystal data storage devices that hummed softly with stored information. Lyrelai had been unusually quiet during their session, and Sarah could sense a troubling undercurrent to her emotions. What's bothering you? Sarah asked gently. The princess was silent for a moment, then sighed. I've been thinking about what the Chancellor said, about succession and royal obligations. My people need leadership and I'm the last of the royal line. But how can I rule effectively if I can't link with my subjects? Maybe that's not the right question, Sarah suggested. Maybe the question is how you can lead in a new way. What do you mean? Well, you've learned to connect with me through human methods. What if you could teach your people the same skills? What if you could expand their understanding of communication beyond just neural linking? Lyrelai turned toward her, her clouded eyes focusing with surprising accuracy on Sarah's face. You think I could teach others? I think you've become something unique, Sarah said honestly. You understand both Zephyrian and human forms of connection. You're like a bridge between different ways of experiencing relationships. The princess was quiet for a long time, and through their connected hands, Sarah could feel her thinking deeply. Finally, Lyrelai spoke. There are others like me, you know. Not just blind, but people who lost their linking ability through accident or illness. They're outcasts, considered incomplete. What if they could learn this too? Would you want to try teaching someone? Yes, the princess said with growing excitement. There's a young man in the outer districts, Veltar. He lost his linking ability in the same type of accident I did. The healers gave up on him years ago. Could we try to help him? Sarah squeezed the princess's hand. I think that's a wonderful idea. The next day they brought Veltar to the palace. He was young, perhaps the equivalent of 20 in human years, with the typical tall, slender build of his species, but none of the usual luminescence. Like the princess, his bioluminescent patches remained dim, marking him as one of the incomplete ones. Your Highness, he said nervously as he was brought into their practice room. I'm honored, but I don't understand why you've summoned me. Because I want to try something, Princess Lyrelai said. I want to see if I can teach you to connect in a new way. Sarah watched as the princess attempted to explain the concept of gradual, emotional connection to another member of her species. It was fascinating to see how Lyrelai had internalized the human approach and was now translating it back to Zephyrian understanding. Instead of trying to link all at once, the princess explained, we start with simple touch. Focus on the physical sensation and the emotional presence of another person. Don't try to hear their thoughts, try to feel their caring. Veltar looked skeptical but willing. When he and the princess made contact, Sarah watched their monitored brain patterns carefully. The same alternative pathways that had developed in Lyrelai were present in Veltar, dormant but capable of activation. It took longer than it had with Sarah, nearly an hour before Veltar experienced his first moment of connection. When it happened, his reaction was profound. Tears streamed down his face as he felt for the first time in years that he wasn't utterly alone. It's real, he whispered. The connection is real. Yes, Princess Lyrelai said gently. It's different from traditional linking, but it's real, and it can grow stronger with practice. Over the following days, word spread quietly through the capital about what the princess was doing. Other incomplete individuals began requesting sessions. Sarah found herself working with Dr. Martinez and Master Physician Kethran to train more humans and Zephyrians in the techniques they were developing. This is revolutionary, Dr. Martinez observed after their 10th successful session. We're not just helping individuals connect, we're creating a new form of interspecies communication protocol. But it was Chancellor Vextar who voiced the concern that everyone was thinking about. Princess, what you're doing is admirable, but it doesn't solve the succession question. Your people need a royal heir, and that requires traditional linking with a Zephyrian noble. Princess Lyrelai straightened to her full height, every inch the royal she had been born to be. Perhaps it's time our people redefined what royal partnership means, she said firmly. I can connect, I can communicate, I can understand and empathize. Isn't that what leadership requires? The Chancellor's lights flickered uncertainly. But the law requires linking. Then perhaps the law needs to change, the princess replied. I've found someone who understands me, who connects with me, who brings out the best in my abilities. Isn't that what marriage should be about? Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. Was the princess referring to her? The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. She had come to Zephyrus Prime as a diplomat, not looking for romance, especially not with alien royalty. But the connection they had built was undeniable. Your Highness, Sarah said carefully, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? Princess Lyrelai turned to face her fully. and for a moment her clouded eyes seemed to see right through to Sarah's soul. I'm suggesting that perhaps the future of my people lies not in maintaining old traditions, but in learning new ways to connect. And I'm asking if you'd be willing to help me show them how. Sarah's mind raced as she processed the princess's words. The implications were staggering, not just personally but diplomatically. A marriage between a human ambassador and Zephyrian royalty would be unprecedented, potentially revolutionary for interspecies relations throughout the galaxy. Lyrelai, she said, using the princess's name without formal titles for the first time. I need to understand what you're asking. Are you talking about a political alliance or something more? The princess reached for Sarah's hands, their connection now so natural that the initial shock had faded to a gentle warmth. Through their touch, Sarah felt the depth of Lyrelai's emotions: hope, affection, determination, and yes, love. I'm talking about both, Lyrelai said honestly. When I first met you, I was desperate for any connection. But over these weeks, what we've built has become so much more. You've shown me that I'm not broken, that I can lead and love and contribute to my people's future. You've given me hope. And you've changed everything I thought I knew about communication and connection, Sarah replied, feeling her own emotions welling up. But Lyrelai, the complexities. I'm human, you're Zephyrian royalty. I have responsibilities to Earth's diplomatic corps. You have duties to your people. Which is exactly why this could work, the princess said with growing excitement. You understand both cultures now. You could help bridge the gap between our peoples in ways no one else could. Chancellor Vextar, who had been listening to this exchange with increasing alarm, stepped forward. Your Highness, with all due respect, this is impossible. The royal succession laws clearly state that the heir must be able to link with a Zephyrian noble. Even if we accept your new form of connection, Ambassador Chen is not Zephyrian. Then perhaps it's time to change those laws, came a new voice from the entrance. Everyone turned to see an elderly Zephyrian approaching, her bioluminescent patches dim with age but her bearing unmistakably regal. Sarah recognized her from her diplomatic briefings. Queen Regent Silvara, Lyrelai's aunt and current ruler until the princess could produce an heir. Aunt Silvara, Princess Lyrelai said, rising and offering a respectful bow. Sit, child, the Queen Regent said gently. I've been observing your progress with great interest. Master Physician Kethron has kept me informed of the medical developments, and Chancellor Vexistar has briefed me on the political implications. She moved to stand before Sarah, studying her with ancient eyes that glowed softly. So you're the human who has taught my niece to connect again? Your Majesty, Sarah said, offering the formal bow appropriate for Zephyrian royalty. I've learned as much from the princess as she has from me. Indeed. The Queen Regent settled into a chair across from them. Tell me, Ambassador Chen, what are your intentions regarding my niece? The direct question caught Sarah off guard. Your Majesty. My feelings for Princess Lyrelai have grown beyond what I expected when I first arrived, but I understand the complications involved. I would never want to create a situation that would harm her or her people. And yet, you have created exactly such a situation, the Queen Regent observed, though her tone wasn't accusatory. My niece was considered unmarriageable, unable to rule effectively. Now she's not only connected with someone but has begun teaching others her new methods. The political ramifications are significant. Princess Lyrelai leaned forward. Aunt Silvara, I know this is unprecedented, but... The Queen Regent held up a hand for silence. Lyrelai, in my 60 years of rule, I've learned that sometimes the most unprecedented solutions are exactly what a society needs to grow. She turned back to Sarah. Tell me, Ambassador, how does your government view interspecies marriage? Earth's policies support individual choice in personal relationships, provided they don't compromise diplomatic interests, Sarah replied carefully. However, marriage to foreign royalty requires approval from the diplomatic corps. And if such approval were granted? Sarah felt her heart racing. Then it would be a personal decision between myself and Princess Lyrelai. The Queen Regent was quiet for a long moment, her luminous eyes studying both women. Finally she spoke. Chancellor Vextar, summon the Council of Nobles. I want them to witness something. Your Majesty? The Chancellor asked uncertainly. I want them to see what true connection looks like, she replied. And then we're going to discuss changing some very old laws. An hour later, the great hall was filled with Zephyrian nobles, their bioluminescent displays creating a constellation of lights in the vast space. Sarah stood beside Princess Lirelei, acutely aware that they were about to participate in a demonstration that could change the course of both their lives. "My lords and ladies," Queen Regent Silvara announced, her voice carrying clearly through the hall, "you have all witnessed the failed linking ceremonies. You know the succession crisis we face. Today I want to show you a different kind of connection." She gestured to Sarah and the princess. "Demonstrate your bond." Sarah took Lyrelei's hands and immediately felt the familiar warmth of their connection. But this time, instead of simply sharing the sensation between themselves, the princess began to speak, describing what she was experiencing. "Through this contact, I can sense Ambassador Chen's emotional state," Lyrelei explained to the assembled nobles. "Her nervousness about this demonstration, her genuine care for me, her hopes for our people's future together. I cannot hear her thoughts directly, but I understand her feelings, her motivations, her character." Sarah picked up the explanation. "And through our connection, I can sense Princess Lyrelei's strength, her intelligence, her deep love for her people. We communicate through empathy, through emotional resonance, through shared experience. This is not linking as we understand it," one of the nobles called out. "No," Princess Lyrelei agreed. "It's something new, something that doesn't require the neural architecture our people are born with, something that could allow all of us to communicate with species throughout the galaxy in ways we never imagined." Master Physician Kethron stepped forward with his medical instruments. "If I may demonstrate, Your Majesty," he said, activating screens that showed both women's neural activity in real time. As you can see, both Ambassador Chen and Princess Lirelei show synchronized brain activity during their connection. They are genuinely communicating, just through different pathways than traditional linking. Dr. Martinez joined the explanation. From a human medical perspective, what they've developed is a form of enhanced empathic bonding. It's not telepathy, but it's a real, measurable form of emotional and psychological connection. The nobles murmured among themselves, their light patterns creating a complex symphony of communication that Sarah was beginning to recognize. Some showed skepticism, others curiosity, and a few displayed what looked like hope. "The question before us," Queen Regent Silvara announced, "is whether we will adapt our understanding of royal partnership to include this new form of connection. Princess Lyrelei has demonstrated that she can bond deeply with another being, that she can communicate effectively, and that she can teach these skills to others. Are these not the qualities we seek in leadership? But the succession laws," Chancellor Vextar began, "can be changed," the Queen Regent said firmly. "Laws exist to serve our people, not the other way around. If our princess has found a way to connect that serves both her personal happiness and the future advancement of our species, then perhaps our laws need to evolve." An elderly noble stepped forward, his lights flickering in patterns of deep thought. "Your Majesty, if we accept this precedent, we would be acknowledging that connection doesn't require traditional linking. This could fundamentally change our society." "Yes," Princess Lyrelei said, her voice carrying new authority. "It could. We could become a people who values understanding over tradition, growth over convention. We could lead the galaxy in developing new forms of interspecies communication." Another noble, younger than the first, spoke up. "And the princess's children? How would succession work if they're part human?" Sarah felt a flutter of surprise at the practical direction the conversation had taken. The idea of children had seemed so distant, but here they were, discussing the future of a potential human Zephyrian royal line. Queen Regent Silvara smiled, the expression making her ancient face seem younger. "That, my dear nobles, is a question for the future to answer. What matters today is whether we will support our princess in her choice to connect in a new way, and whether we will accept Ambassador Chen as a potential bridge between our peoples." The debate that followed lasted hours, but gradually, a consensus emerged. The nobles were not just accepting the possibility of change, they were embracing it. The practical benefits of having a royal who could communicate with humans, who understood both cultures, who could advance Zephyrian interests throughout the galaxy, were too significant to ignore. As the session concluded, Sarah realized that she and Lyrelei had accidentally started a revolution in interspecies relations. The question now was whether they were ready for everything that would come next. The weeks following the Noble Assembly were a whirlwind of diplomatic communications, legal preparations, and personal revelations. Sarah found herself working closely with both Earth's diplomatic corps and the Zephyrian Council of Nobles to navigate the unprecedented situation they had created. Ambassador Chen, Admiral Harrison's voice crackled through the quantum communication array. I want to be very clear about what you're asking. You want permission to marry an alien princess, fundamentally alter the succession laws of a major galactic power, and establish humanity as a bridge species for interspecies communication? When you put it that way, it does sound rather ambitious, Sarah admitted, sitting in the palace's communication center with Princess Lyra Lee beside her. But Admiral, the opportunities here are extraordinary. The Zephyrians control major trade routes through this sector. A formal alliance through marriage could open doors for humanity that we've never had before. And the personal aspect? Admiral Harrison asked pointedly. Are you certain your feelings for Princess Lyra Lee aren't clouding your judgment? Sarah glanced at Lyra Lee, who squeezed her hand encouragingly. Through their connection, she could feel the princess's nervous hope. I won't pretend that personal feelings aren't involved, Sarah said honestly. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life. This isn't just about love. It's about the future of interspecies relations. I need to speak with the princess directly, Admiral Harrison said. Your Highness, are you prepared for what marriage to a human would mean? You'd be setting a precedent that could affect your entire species' development. Princess Lyra Lee straightened, every inch the royal she was born to be. Admiral Harrison, 3 months ago I believed I was broken, incapable of the connections that define my people's existence. Ambassador Chen didn't just help me discover a new way to communicate. She helped me realize that different doesn't mean inferior. If our marriage can help other species discover new forms of connection, then I consider that a responsibility, not a burden. There was a long pause before the Admiral responded. Ambassador, you have preliminary approval from the diplomatic corps. Final authorization will depend on the specific terms of the alliance. Make sure this benefits humanity as much as it does the Zephyrians. After the transmission ended, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. One hurdle down, she said to Lyra Lee, and several more to go, the princess replied with a slight smile. My aunt has called for a formal succession hearing. The nobles need to officially approve the change to our laws before we can proceed. That afternoon brought unexpected visitors to the palace. Dr. Martinez burst into their practice room with obvious excitement, followed by Master Physician Kethryn and a young Zephyrian Sarah didn't recognize. Sarah, Lyra Lee, you need to see this, Dr. Martinez announced. Show them, Veltar. The young Zephyrian they had helped weeks earlier stepped forward, but something about him was different. His bioluminescent patches, which had been completely dim before, were now glowing softly. How is this possible? Princess Lyra Lee asked in amazement. The alternative neural pathways you've been developing, Master Physician Kethryn explained excitedly. They're not just replacing the damaged linking abilities, they're enhancing them. Veltar can now perform a limited form of traditional linking, but also maintain the empathic connections you've taught him. Veltar nodded enthusiastically. Your Highness, I can link with other Zephyrians again, but I can also connect with humans and even with species that our people could never link with before. I'm becoming something new. Dr. Martinez pulled up holographic displays of brain scans. We think the combination of traditional Zephyrian neural architecture with human empathic training is creating hybrid communication abilities. People who learn your methods don't just gain human-style connection, they become bridges between different forms of consciousness. This changes everything, Princess Lyra Lee breathed. Indeed it does, came Queen Regent Silvara's voice from the doorway. She entered with Chancellor Vexitar and several other officials. Word of Veltar's transformation has already spread throughout the capital. The implications for our society are profound. Sarah studied the Queen Regent's expression, trying to read her mood. Is that a positive development, Your Majesty? That depends on how we handle it, the Queen Regent replied. The succession hearing has been moved to tomorrow. The Council of Nobles wants to see this development for themselves before they make their final decision. The next morning, the Great Hall was packed not just with nobles, but with representatives from other species throughout the sector. Word had spread through diplomatic channels about the unprecedented developments on Zephyros Prime, and apparently everyone wanted to witness history being made. Sarah stood beside Princess Lyrelay before the assembled crowd, their hands linked in the connection that had started everything. She could feel the princess's nervousness, but also her determination and growing confidence. "We are gathered," Queen Regent Silvara announced, "to witness the formal consideration of new succession laws, and to evaluate the proposal that Princess Lyrelay be permitted to marry outside traditional Zephyrian nobility." Chancellor Vextar stepped forward with a crystal data storage device. "The proposed amendments to the succession laws have been reviewed by legal scholars throughout our territory. The changes would establish that royal partnerships may be formed through any meaningful form of connection, whether traditional linking or alternative methods that achieve equivalent communication and bonding." "And the implications for succession?" asked one of the nobles. "Future heirs would be evaluated based on their ability to communicate effectively with their subjects and represent Zephyrian interests, regardless of their specific neural architecture," the Chancellor replied. Sarah noticed movement in the crowd as Veltar and several other individuals who had been learning the new connection methods moved forward. They were a mix of Zephyrians, humans from her ship's crew, and even a few aliens from other species who had requested to participate in the experimental communication sessions. "Your Majesty," Veltar said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall, "we would like to demonstrate something." "Proceed." The Queen Regent nodded. What followed was remarkable. The mixed group formed a circle, each person connecting with the individuals on either side. Sarah watched as they created a communication network that transcended species barriers. Zephyrians linking with their own kind, humans connecting through empathy and touch, and several alien species contributing their own unique forms of consciousness sharing. "This is what the Princess and Ambassador Chen have made possible," Veltar explained as the demonstration continued. "Not just individual connections, but networks of understanding that include multiple species and multiple forms of communication. We're becoming something new. Not just Zephyrians or humans or any single species, but bridges between all forms of conscious life." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. They hadn't just developed a new form of personal connection. They had accidentally created a model for galactic communication networks that could revolutionize interspecies relations. Throughout known space, Princess Lyrelay stepped forward, her royal bearing evident despite her blindness. "My lords and ladies," she addressed the assembly, "when I lost my sight and linking ability, I thought I had lost everything that made me capable of leadership. Ambassador Chen taught me that leadership isn't about conforming to traditional expectations. It's about finding new ways to serve your people and advance their interests." She gestured toward the connected group. "If our marriage can help establish Zephyros Prime as the center for interspecies communication research and development, if it can position our people as leaders in galactic cooperation, then it serves not just our personal happiness but the advancement of our entire civilization." The debate that followed was intense, but ultimately brief. The practical benefits were too obvious to ignore. The formal vote was overwhelmingly in favor of the law changes and the royal marriage, but it was Queen Regent Silvara who provided the final, crucial element. "There is one more matter to address," she announced as the voting concluded. "Princess Lyrelay, as the last of the direct royal line, your marriage to Ambassador Chen would normally end the traditional succession. However, given the extraordinary circumstances and the new forms of leadership you've demonstrated, I propose something unprecedented." She stood, her ancient frame somehow radiating power and authority. "I propose that instead of ending the royal line, your marriage begins a new one. A line that represents not just Zephyrian leadership, but interspecies cooperation and communication. A royal house that serves as a bridge between civilizations." Sarah felt Lyrelay's hand tighten in hers as the magnitude of the proposal sank in. They weren't just getting married. They were being asked to become the foundation of a new form of galactic leadership. "The question," the Queen Regent continued, "is whether you're both prepared for that responsibility." Sarah looked at Princess Lyrelay, seeing past her clouded eyes to the strength and determination that had drawn them together. Through their connection, she could feel the princess's mixture of excitement, fear, and absolute certainty. "We're ready," they said simultaneously. The months that followed the succession hearing transformed Zephyros Prime into the bustling center of interspecies diplomatic activity. Representatives from dozens of civilizations arrived to study the new communication methods and explore potential alliances with the emerging hybrid royal house. Sarah found herself juggling her roles as human ambassador, princess consort-elect, and inadvertent pioneer of galactic communication theory. The palace had been converted into a research center, with sections dedicated to studying different forms of consciousness interface and connection protocols. The Centaurian delegates are particularly interested in the emotional resonance aspects, Dr. Martinez reported during their weekly progress meeting. Their species communicates primarily through biochemical pheromones, but they've shown remarkable adaptation to human-style empathic connection. Princess Lyra Lay, who had grown more confident and authoritative with each passing day, reviewed the reports with practiced ease. Despite her blindness, she had developed an impressive ability to process information through audio briefings and tactile data displays. "What about the silicon-based entities from Kepler Station?" she asked. "I know their form of consciousness is radically different from biological species." "Fascinating development there," Master Physician Kethran interjected. "They seem to interface with your hybrid communication networks through electromagnetic resonance. It's completely unlike anything we've seen before." Sarah was continually amazed by how the princess had embraced their expanding role. The woman who had once sat isolated on a throne, rejected by traditional suitors, was now at the center of revolutionary developments that were reshaping galactic society. "There's something else," Dr. Martinez said, her tone suggesting importance. "The Earth Diplomatic Corps has requested a formal demonstration for the Galactic Council. They want to see if our methods can be applied to resolve the ongoing communication crisis in the Andromeda trade disputes." The Andromeda situation had been festering for years, multiple species with incompatible communication methods unable to reach meaningful agreements about territorial and resource rights. Traditional diplomatic approaches had failed because the species involved literally couldn't understand each other in any meaningful way. "When?" Princess Lyra Lay asked. 6 weeks from now. The council is convening a special session on Nexus Station." Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Nexus Station was the largest diplomatic facility in known space, and a successful demonstration there would establish their methods as galactically significant. Failure would be equally public and devastating. "We'll need to expand our training program," Sarah said thoughtfully. "We can't just bring Veltar and the others. We need representatives from multiple species who can demonstrate the full range of hybrid communication possibilities." Over the following weeks, the palace became a hive of intense preparation. They worked with volunteers from 17 different species, each learning to interface with the expanding communication network in their own unique way. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Kexara, a crystalline entity from the Silicon Coalition, approached Sarah during one of the practice sessions. "Ambassador Chen," Kexara said, their voice resonating through harmonic vibrations in their crystal matrix. "I've been observing your training methods. I believe you're thinking too small." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "You're teaching individuals to connect with other individuals," Kexara explained. "But my species thinks in terms of network consciousness. What if we scaled your methods to create permanent communication infrastructure?" Sarah felt her mind racing with possibilities. "You mean like a galactic communication network that could interface with any form of consciousness?" "Precisely. Using your hybrid methods as the foundation, we could create relay stations that translate between different forms of awareness. A universal consciousness interface." When Sarah brought this idea to Princess Lyrelai, the response was immediate enthusiasm. "This is bigger than marriage or succession," Lyrelai said, her clouded eyes somehow seeming to glow with excitement. "We could be creating the foundation for true galactic unity." "Are you sure we're ready for something this ambitious?" Sarah asked. 6 weeks ago, we were just trying to help you connect with someone. Now we're talking about reshaping galactic civilization." Princess Lyrelai took Sarah's hands in their familiar gesture, and through their connection, Sarah felt the princess's absolute certainty. "Sarah, when you first offered to try linking with me, you took a risk on something impossible. Every step since then has been building toward something bigger. I think this is why we found each other." The demonstration at Nexus Station exceeded everyone's expectations. The mixed species communication network they had assembled didn't just successfully mediate between the Andromeda disputants, it created a framework for ongoing cooperation that impressed even the most skeptical council members. "What we're witnessing," announced High Counselor Tyrek of the Vulcan Scientific Alliance, "is the emergence of a new paradigm for interspecies relations. The hybrid communication methods developed on Zephyros Prime represent a fundamental advancement in consciousness interface technology." Sarah and Princess Lyreley stood before the Galactic Council, their hands linked as always, representing not just their own relationship, but the possibility of unprecedented cooperation between all forms of conscious life. The Council recognizes, High Counselor Tyrek continued, the formal establishment of the first hybrid royal house with Princess Lyreley and Ambassador Sarah Chen as its founding members. Furthermore, we approve the establishment of the Interspecies Communication Institute on Zephyros Prime, with permanent funding and support from the Galactic Council. The applause that followed came from dozens of species, each expressing approval, in their own unique way. Bioluminescent flashes, harmonic resonances, electromagnetic pulses, and traditional human clapping, creating a symphony of galactic unity. But for Sarah, the most meaningful moment came later, in their private quarters aboard the diplomatic vessel. She and Lyreley sat together in comfortable silence, processing the magnitude of what they had accomplished. "Do you ever wonder," Lyreley asked softly, "what would have happened if you hadn't been willing to take my hand that first day?" "I try not to think about it," Sarah replied honestly. "The idea of missing all of this, missing you, is too painful to consider." "I was so angry that day," the princess admitted. "Angry at my blindness, at my inability to link, at being considered broken and useless. I was ready to give up on everything. And now?" Princess Lyreley smiled, and in that expression Sarah saw not just the woman she had fallen in love with, but the leader who was helping reshape the galaxy. "Now I understand that being broken in one way can make you stronger in others. My inability to link traditionally forced me to find new ways to connect. Your willingness to take a chance on something impossible created possibilities neither of us imagined." Sarah squeezed the princess's hand, feeling the familiar warmth of their connection. "So what happens next?" "We go back to Zephyros Prime," Lyreley said with growing excitement. "We continue developing the Institute. We help other species learn to connect in new ways. We get married." "In that order?" Sarah asked with amusement. "Actually, I was hoping we could move the wedding up in the schedule," the princess said, turning toward Sarah with a smile that was both shy and confident. "I've been thinking that it's time to stop preparing for the future and start living it." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. "Are you proposing to me, Princess Lyreley of Zephyros Prime?" "I'm proposing to you, Sarah Chen of Earth," Lyreley replied. "Will you marry me and help me build a future where connection transcends every barrier that consciousness can imagine?" As Sarah leaned forward to kiss her princess, she reflected on how a simple act of compassion had grown into something that would reshape the galaxy. Sometimes, she realized, the most extraordinary adventures begin with the smallest acts of kindness, like taking the hand of someone who needed to know they weren't alone. "Yes," she whispered against Lyreley's lips, "to all of it."